Hey folks, Mark Levin here. Now, before we dive into today's episode, I want to talk about something truly valuable, protecting your financial future with gold. It's called diversification. Now, for that, I only trust Advantage Gold. They're the real deal with 5-star service and a sterling reputation. So give them a call today. Call Advantage Gold at 800-900-8000. Tell them Mark Levin sent you. Trust me, you'll thank yourself in the future. Now let's get to the show. Results may vary. Consult with your financial professional.
He's here. He's here. Now, broadcasting from the underground command post, deep in the bowels of a hidden bunker, somewhere under the brick and steel of a nondescript building, we've once again made contact with our leader, Mark Levin.
We have somebody that hasn't received one vote for president, and she's running, and that's fine with me. But we were given Joe Biden, and now we're given somebody else. And I think, frankly, I'd rather be running against the somebody else. But that was their choice. They decided to do that because Kamala's record is horrible. She's a radical left person at a level that nobody's seen. She picked a radical left man that is, he's got things done that he has positions that are just not, it's not even possible to believe that they exist. He's going for things that nobody's ever even heard of. Heavy into the transgender world, heavy into lots of different worlds having to do with safety. He doesn't want to have borders. He doesn't want to have walls. He doesn't want to have any form of safety for our country. He doesn't mind people coming in from prisons, and neither does she, I guess, because she couldn't care less. She's the border czar.
Yeah, no doubt. And he's speaking about Tim Pond there. You know, Tim Stolen Valor Walz. We're going to be diving into him in the second hour of the show. Presidential contrast, and every day that Joe Biden is president and Kamala Harris is vice president, the world is less safe. Yes, even Swifties, and even the Swifties for Harris. I'm Brian Mudd in for Mark Levin. Mark is a little under the weather. We anticipate he will make a fast recovery and hopefully be back with us all tomorrow night. But we have a lot to talk about. I am taking a look at what we have in front of us right now, and it's the most contrast that we have ever had between two major party candidates in this country's history. And when I talk about that, the two major party candidates at any moment in time, with the measurables, with things that you can analyze, we've never had more contrast. So it's not just Trump talking about, tampon over there is putting tampons in boys' bathrooms in Minnesota schools. And he would like to see policies like that continue across this country. It's actually the reason why he was selected as Kamala's choice. And as we take a look at the contrasts with Trump today and his presser, which, by the way, that presser might actually still be going on. And I kind of think, like, left to his own devices, Trump would still be going right now. I mean, it's obviously his favorite thing to do. Just get out there and talk with people. It's just like his rallies. It is every bit that way with the press. Even the hostile questions that are constantly lobbed in. He enjoys it. If you ask any member of the White House press corps, the most transparent president they have ever worked with, any honest one of them will tell you it's Donald Trump. They could hate him, but they'll tell you he was every single day making himself available. These people? Oh my gosh. Where are they? But the bigger thing is, in the where are they, where Joe Biden and Kamala Harris don't even make themselves available to the press. Kamala, at any point since she's become the presumptive Democrat nominee, what does that do? When you're scared to even handle the press in this country, you think you're scared? You think you're projecting weakness on that world stage? And that's what we continue to see, is that the weakness they're projecting by trying to run another basement campaign with Kamala Harris, it's making everybody less safe progressively. I'm going to walk you through a little bit of this again. You know, you can go back to Kamala Harris's first major decision as presumptive Democrat nominee. What was it? A lot of people think, well, the first major decision she made was obviously her VP pick. It was Walz. No, false. The first major decision that Kamala Harris made from the time that she became the presumptive Democrat nominee was to go to a sorority event. It was to go to a sorority event. It was sorry, Netanyahu, I know that I'm the president of the Senate as the vice president of the United States. I know that you are coming to Congress, and it is my role as president of the Senate to actually preside over this visit. But I was busy. I had another scheduled event. It was a sorority event. What are you going to do? And then what did we see? We immediately saw Hezbollah carry out their biggest offensive to date, killing 12 children in Israel. We saw Israel doing what Israel needed to do. Netanyahu taking out two evil men, two terrorist leaders, right? And then what happened? Now we've been on pins and needles for well over a week yet again as Iran is readying for whatever their attack is going to be. And actually, the longer they wait, the more concerned I think we should be because of the level of planning that goes into it. If you go back to what Iran did in April, it turned out not to be very effective, right? And to the point where it was widely acknowledged, even by the mullahs in Iran, that it didn't work at all according to their plan. Like, they were really surprised themselves at just how ineffective their attack was. What they're doing now, what they're waiting for, clearly seems like it's going to be far more intentional. They're talking about taking out the IDF headquarters, everything else. That weakness. Just think about the weakness projected by Joe Biden that allowed all this to start with Afghanistan and the collapse there, with China and the provocation that allowed them to consolidate power over Hong Kong and everything they do against Taiwan, the Philippines, Russia invading Ukraine, as Trump spoke about today, never would have happened. Never would have happened if he was president of the United States. October 7th last year, Hamas never pulls off that crap against Israel if he's president of the United States. And I've even highlighted in months previous what's happened with ISIS. And it was Moscow. Got a lot of attention at the time. But all of a sudden, you heard ISIS was back on the world stage to the point where they could carry out a sophisticated terror attack at an entertainment venue in Moscow, killing over 150 people. And you knew that wasn't the last you're going to hear of them. That was actually the escalation of what was to come. And what have we seen happen? All this weakness continues to culminate in, oh, look at this. Now even the Swifties aren't safe, right? Even the Swifties are in peril. Even Taylor Swift now has to cancel concerts in Vienna because of an ISIS sympathizer. Somebody who's been radicalized by ISIS again, set to carry out terror attacks. Did any of this happen under Donald Trump? Did any of the Swifties miss out on any of their concerts? Did we have any of these wars taking place, or is there a de-escalation of everything? Why? Simply because Donald Trump did what these weak leaders won't do. He bombed the blank out of ISIS. He made them go away. But as we talk about contrast, one of the things I'm going to demonstrate here specifically is the voting record of one Kamala Harris and one Tim Valor Walz. We have comparative voting records. One of the things that's helpful with these two people, they actually were members of Congress while Donald Trump was president of the United States. That gives us some real analytical stuff to work with. So I'm going to bring you that. But just kind of as we work through this, you know, Trump, when he was talking about his press conference today, when he was previewing it, he called it a general news conference. And The whole point of it was just to offer up again the contrast that he was seeking to draw between him and Harris. His truth this morning about it. He said Kamala refuses to do interviews because her team realizes she's unable to answer questions. Much like Biden was not able to answer questions, but for different reasons. He is just plain shot, and she is just plain incompetent. And by the way, when he said he is just plain shot, I mean, there's a little bit of the irony not lost on me. You know what? While the former and perhaps future president of the United States was recently shot, he obviously isn't shot in the sense that he's referring to the current president of the United States. Yeah, he gladly fielded questions from all comers today. And meanwhile, as J.D. Vance is quick to remind us as well, it's now been 18 days since Kamala Harris became the Democrats' presumptive presidential nominee. Still no press conference. Still not a single interview that she's granted to anybody. You know the last interview she did? You have to go back before all this with Morning Schmo. Last time she did anything was on Morning Joe on MSNBC. She's not done a real interview. She's done no pressers, nothing. And the one time she was caught in public off script during this time was what? It was to get in a photo op with the returning Americans and green card holder recently released in the very pricey prisoner exchange with Russia, which, by the way, this is something else that I want to dive into just a little bit more, is the actual price that was paid, because the weakness that these two project, that Biden and Harris project, and not only leads to everything being less safe, including the Swifties, but it makes every different decision that is made a compromise one. It was an obscene price that we paid to Russia last week to get these prisoners back. Absolutely obscene. But of course, you know, the one time she went off script, which was during that photo op, she told us that this is just an extraordinary testament to the importance of having a president who understands the power of diplomacy and understands the strength that rests in understanding the significance of diplomacy. Right. By the way, something I actually got a kick out of, if you go back to that video, you know, they're returning prisoners and Harris, you know, doing her word salad thing there. Watch Biden. You know, Biden is right next to her. I found myself, when I went back and watched it, doing a similar thing that I was doing like with Trump and Biden during the debate. During the debate, like the first go around when I was watching it live, I was keeping my eyes on Biden when he was talking, much like Trump, because it was the holy crap, this guy is really that far gone, right? Because we actually were expecting jacked up Joe or something. And it's like, my mouth was almost hanging open as much as his, because holy crap, this guy really is that far gone. And then if you go back and watch it afterwards, and you just kind of look at Trump's reactions when they would do the side-by-side, that's kind of like what Biden was doing to Harris during her word salad thing. It was very interesting, the expressions. There's some entertainment to be had. Joe looking at Kamala like, what? What did you just say? And not just because, you know, it's his typical mummified self, but because really there's no understanding what she said. But in any event, you take a look at the contrast. Trump and his transparency, Kamala Harris trying to run a 2.0 basement campaign, at least in terms of press access. But the big thing that came out of today's presser was what? It was Trump agreeing to do not one, not two, but 3 presidential debates all in September. The first, September 4th with Fox News. The second, September 10th with NBC News. The third, September 25th with ABC. So this debate proposal really kind of gives her nowhere to go, nowhere to hide at the onset of the election season, which is important because the election season starts September 16th. That's when votes start in the uber important state of Pennsylvania. So Trump very strategically here getting 2 of those debate times in before votes start in Pennsylvania. I mean, what do you think she's going to do? Really good chance she'll come back and say, maybe I'll do the NBC or the ABC. Maybe. Not. You need to do all 3. Why would you be scared of Fox when you got NBC and ABC, right? So this will be an interesting, the gauntlet's been thrown down. It's going to be very interesting to see what comes next. I'm Brian Mudd, in for the great one.
Mark Levin.
We're living in unprecedented times. Every day we're seeing new breaking news. In fact, we're seeing challenges like we've never seen before. So in times like these, you need a solid foundation for your finances. And that's where diversification and gold come in. Gold has always been one of the ultimate safe havens in times of turmoil. When it comes to gold, I only trust one company, Advantage Gold. They're a 5-star American company that I recommend to you. They're experts in precious metals and specialize in helping Americans protect their money with gold and silver. You can even use an existing retirement savings with zero fees. Call Advantage Gold today, 800-900-8000, and they'll send you a free gold investment kit to help you get started. Tell them Mark Levin sent you to see if you qualify for $1,000 in free silver. Help protect your wealth now with Advantage Gold. Call 800-900-8000 for your free gold investment kit, 800-900-8000. Tell them Mark Levin sent you. Performance may vary. You should always consult your financial and tax professional.
This is just an extraordinary testament to the importance of having a president who understands the power of diplomacy and understands the strength that rests in understanding the significance of diplomacy and strengthening alliances. This is an incredible day.
Yeah, that's probably the reason that she isn't fielding any questions. Probably the reason that she hasn't done an hour-plus long presser like Donald Trump did today. Somebody has game and somebody doesn't in this presidential race. Brian Mudd in for Mark Levin. And even the Swifties for Harris are less safe because of that. Because what does that project on the world stage? So that is what she said when she squeezed into a photo op, left the campaign trail, goes back to do the photo op with Biden when the American prisoners were coming back from Russia. What does that project in the world stage? If you take a look at maybe the only thing that is holding any of the world together to the extent that it is, and it's like a pin in a grenade right now that's essentially been pulled as it is, it's Trump. It's just him being there on the horizon. Because all these bad actors know, hold on, if we do the World War III thing right now and Trump gets in there, that'll be bad. They also don't want him to be elected either. So there's that. So they're trying to, hence, Putin going along to get a deal done, something that he thought would be helpful for Biden and Harris. But even the price that was paid for that, the obscene price that was paid for all that, the first thing you think of, your favorite sports team makes a big trade, lands a big name. What do you want the answer to? What's the first thing you think about? Is it, oh, well, that's really cool, we got that player? Or is it, okay, what did we give up? Right? You never really evaluate how a trade went down until you actually consider what went back the other way. And ultimately, that's how any trade is evaluated historically, is how did both sides fare with the pieces that were handled. Okay, so we got 3 Americans and a green card holder back. Okay, that's good, but what we gave up, the price, exceedingly ridiculous, and that is because of how weak Biden and Harris happen to be. I'll go through a few of those specifics, take your calls. We're going to get to Harris's voting record compared to Trump's, give you an idea of how liberal she is very soon. I'm Brian Mudd, in for the great one, Mark Levin.
We're living in strange times. All the news out there these days seems to be breaking news. The only thing that is certain is change. Regardless of the marketplace, and in these times of instability, many small investors turn to gold. It's been a bedrock of wealth preservation for millennia. And when I think of gold, I think of Advantage Gold. They're not just another precious metals company. They're true partners in helping Americans find financial stability. Advantage Gold's experts get the relationship between politics and economics, and they can navigate you through these crazy times using gold to help shield your hard-earned wealth from the shockwaves of political upheaval. So call our friends at Advantage Gold now at 800-900-8000 for a free gold investment kit. Help protect your wealth now with Advantage Gold. Again, 800-900-8000 for your free investment kit. And remember, tell them Mark Levin sent you to see if you qualify for up to $1,000 in free silver. That's 800-900-8000. Performance may vary. You should always consult your financial and tax professional.
The liberals and the Republicans don't like him, but America does. You can call Mark Levin at 877-381-3811.
I haven't recalibrated strategy at all. It's the same policies, open borders, weak on crime. I think she's worse than Biden because he got forced into the position. She was there long before. She destroyed San Francisco. She destroyed California as the AG. But as the DA, she destroyed San Francisco. A friend of mine, Bob Tisch, all know the Tisch family. He was in many cities with companies. He said the greatest city in the country is San Francisco. That was about 20 years ago. And he passed away a while ago, and he would be looking down and said, what happened? He thought it was the best city in the country. He had divisions there, lows. And he would be looking down in horror now when he sees she destroyed no cash bail, weak on crime. She's terrible.
And it makes the world less safe every single day. Here is the reality on the ground. The Swifties are safer right now around the world if Donald Trump is president of the United States. You would not have, and we can say this definitively, you would not have any threats, any of the threats that have been made against the Swifties, the concerts that had to be canceled in Vienna, the Taylor Swift concerts because of ISIS terrorists, because we didn't have ISIS when Trump was president. He bombed the blank out of them. He made them go away. And then the weakness of this administration allowed them to grow back to where they're a problem around the world again, to where we have to worry about them radicalizing here in the United States, to where Taylor Swift fans have to worry about going to a concert now. That is how weak Joe Biden and Kamala Harris happen to be. And Trump, at his presser today, was 100% right about all that. She is even to the left of Joe. And I'm going to break that down for you. But the weakness manifests itself in so many different ways. Like, for example, the price that was paid. And just to finish up that point for a moment, by the way, Brian Mudd in for Mark Levin. You can check me out at Brian Mudd Radio socially, The Brian Mudd Show podcast, wherever you get your podcasts. Host of The Brian Mudd Show, and can be heard weekday mornings. I originate from my home station, WJNO in West Palm Beach. Just handful of miles away from Mar-a-Lago, where Trump's presser was today. But just to give you an idea, because the price that we pay because we were weak. So Putin wanted Biden and Harris to get a win by getting Americans and a green card holder back. But in case you didn't hear the details of who happened to be given up, you had a hitman that worked directly for Putin. Okay, a hitman that worked directly for Putin. You had a cyber fraud scam artist responsible for stealing and funneling back to Russia $169 million from Americans. That's fun. You had a Russian intelligence operative who had been stealing U.S. military equipment bound for Ukraine to use for Russia in the war against Ukraine. So you got that. We had military equipment that we paid for that was supposed to be going to Ukraine to use against Russia. You had a Russian operative who was able to intercept some of that, redirected so Russia could use it against Ukraine. That's fun, right? That's one of the people we gave back in this exchange, this phenomenal deal last week. We gave up another sophisticated hacker who stole and funneled $92 million away from American businesses. And then we gave up 4 Russian spies who funneled supplies and resources to Russian sleeper agents throughout NATO countries. So then you take a look and you ask yourself, in terms of this trade, was this actually a good trade? How many people think the hitman for Putin is done carrying out hits? Do you think the people that are on the receiving end of those hits going forward are going to think this was a good trade? Think their families are? people on the receiving. What about the Russian scam artists? Do you think they're done stealing hundreds of millions of dollars or maybe more from Americans, including the hacker who gets involved in stealing that money from businesses specifically? Are the Russian spies done spying? Is the operative who intercepts U.S. military equipment sent overseas done intercepting military equipment? And that's all part of the weakness. All part of the price that is paid because of how freaking weak we are. A war that would never have happened with Russia and Ukraine. And prices that are paid in so many different ways every single day because of their weakness on the world stage. Now, in terms of how much of a leftist Harris really is, one of the things about her track record, we can go back and take a look. She happened to have a very convenient track record in the United States Senate. I mean, the first thing is we take a look at her record as vice president. We all know it was garbage. You know, one of the most phenomenal things about just how intellectually inconsistent so many on the left are, Harris only had a 38% approval rating as vice president. She actually had a lower approval rating as vice president than Joe Biden did as president the day he dropped out. And now you see her, you know, having popped in the polls. Her favorability rating is up 6 points over it was. She just pretends, I was never really vice president unless I'm just there doing a photo op to get back the prisoners and trying to pretend as though all of her failures, like the border, she wasn't really responsible for. She's not accountable to anybody in the media. She's not accountable to any of the questions that any of us have to her because she's running her basement campaign. But she just kind of, and you actually have some people that go along with this, which is the remarkable thing. But about the actual record, here's what she can't run from. Harris spent 4 years in the United States Senate, which happened to coincide precisely with the 4 years of the Trump presidency. So as a result, we can compare her voting record directly to the voting records of other members of Congress and directly to Donald Trump's position as president. To put this in perspective, you had 120 senators that cast votes during Trump's 4 years in office. Of them, only 6 senators were less likely to vote for Trump's positions on the issues that were brought before the Senate. In other words, if President Trump's position on the issues is used as a barometer of whatever you want it to be. I mean, you could call it a conservative position. I know not every one of his positions necessarily was, but the Trump position, you literally only had 6 people that ever voted to the left of where Harris was. In other words, 94% to the left of her colleagues. By comparison, if you take a look at Chuck Schumer, Senate Democrat leader Chuck Schumer, his voting record was 7% more conservative than Harris's. And who ended up having the closest voting record to Kamala Harris? You know, Trump has referenced this. It was the burn. Kamala Harris's voting record was only 0.3% different than Bernie Sanders. The company that Kamala Harris was keeping, Bernie Sanders, Cory Booker, Elizabeth Warren. That was her company in the United States Senate, the Socialist. So, if you're trying to infer an ideological shift here for a moment, here's an idea. Harris voted in line with Trump's position 16.4% of the time. By way of comparison, the average Democrat voted with Trump 26% of the time, just over a quarter of the time. Okay, so she was that much further left than the average congressional Democrat during those 4 years. So effectively, what you have is an 84% degree of difference in policy positions between Trump and Harris. Now, in my research, it represents the greatest divide in overall policy positions between the two major party candidates that I've studied. And it also puts in context something else. If you take a look at the average Republican and Democrat in this country, you and me, like, if you're a lefty, you and me, the average person that is on the right, the average person that is on the left, how different are we from each other? The answer is about 40%. We're about 40% away from each other on the issues. This is something that Gallup has studied for decades to try to figure out where do people fit in line. All right. So, and this, by the way, helps explain why the two parties and Republicans and Democrats almost never agree on anything anymore, because it has to be a 90% position for one party just to have half the support of the other one, for example. That's a pretty wide divide, 40%. But then think of this. What did I just tell you? The difference between Trump and Harris is 84%. It's more than double that. And who's the real radical here? I mean, you can't play that game against Trump anymore. Pre-COVID, things were great, right? Had the best economy we've ever had, record low unemployment for every minority group, negligible inflation, super high wage growth, the best since the 90s. The wage growth was on fire. Everything was good, right? We didn't have wars. We had de-escalation of conflict around the world. In fact, we had peace breaking out with Israel rather than war breaking out with Israel. All those things were happening. So who's the actual radical here? If there is greater than twice the difference on the issues ideologically between Trump and Harris compared to the average Republican and Democrat in this country, who is the actual radical? That gives you an idea of just how much risk there is in this election, how much is truly on the line, and why this is the most important election of our lives. Let's go to Ralph in Central Florida. Ralph, welcome to the show.
Yes, sir. Hello.
You're on.
Yeah, I was on a while ago, but you said to wait around and talk to you. I don't think people understand that. Sean Hannity called me at 1 o'clock in the afternoon about 3 months ago. He knows who I am. I've run labor in South Florida for many years. I worked with Cope. I had 3 votes on Cope. I'm not trying to brag. I'm an old retired guy. I turned 80 last week. I've been an operating engineer in Miami for 55 years, crane operator mostly. And I'm the one that got the police their cars to drive home in Dade County. Me and John Strigel with the PBA, and a friend of mine said, I got 11 out of 13 Dade County commissioners elected.
Yeah, Ralph, you got a point? You're going somewhere with this?
The point is, I don't believe I could be wrong, but I can't see how they can have an election this year. If they do, they're going to lose their power. And we're talking about Marxists. We're talking about bad people here. And I'm pretty sure everybody understands that the people that are running this country right now are not friends of Americans. And if Trump gets elected, he'll clean house. And I don't think they're going to let that happen. I think what they're doing is fighting for their survival right now. They know they're in trouble, All
right. Appreciate the call, Ralph. I mean, we certainly hope that doesn't come to that. I mean, now we do have Biden that ended up saying that there would not be a peaceful transfer of power if Trump is elected. This in a recorded interview with CBS that's going to air Sunday morning. So there is, and then he corrected. He's like, I truly think it was a who am I, where am I, what am I doing here kind of moment that, and he thought it was 4 years ago, but maybe it could be something more than that. I sincerely hope it doesn't come to that, Ralph. I don't anticipate that it will. We've got to get out there and vote like we've never voted before. That's what it's going to take is, people getting out there and voting, making a difference. It's not going to be COVID that shuts things down this time or anything else. This is about us getting out there and doing what we can. The poll watchers, you name it. And be right back with you. Brian Mudd in for the great one.
Mark Levin.
We're living in unprecedented times. Every day we're seeing new breaking news. In fact, we're seeing challenges like we've never seen before. So in times like these, you need a solid foundation for your finances. And that's where diversification and gold come in. Gold has always been one of the ultimate safe havens in times of turmoil. When it comes to gold, I only trust one company, Advantage Gold. They're a 5-star American company that I recommend to you. They're experts in precious metals and specialize in helping Americans protect their money with gold and silver. You can even use an existing retirement savings with zero fees. Call Advantage Gold today, 800-900-8000, and they'll send you a free gold investment kit to help you get started. Tell them Mark Levin sent you to see if you qualify for $1,000 in free silver. Help protect your wealth now with Advantage Gold. Call 800-900-8000 for your free gold investment kit, 800-900-8000. Tell them Mark Levin sent you. Performance may vary. You should always consult your financial and tax professional.
But the presidency was taken away from Joe Biden. And I'm no Biden fan, but I'll tell you what, from a constitutional standpoint, from any standpoint you look at, they took the presidency away. And people were saying he lost after the debate. He couldn't win. Well, I don't know that that's true necessarily. But whether he could win or he couldn't win, he had the right to run. And they took it away. They said they're going to use the 25th Amendment. They're going to hit you hard. Either we can do it the nice. I know exactly, because I know a lot of people on the other side, believe it or not. And they said, we'll do it the nice way or we'll do it the hard way. And he said, all right. So that, I mean, they've really taken, what they've done is pretty incredible.
Yeah, so Trump at Mar-a-Lago, the presser today, and what he's saying is absolutely true. You know, the way this whole thing went down is, look, you can get out now and we will let you stay to complete your presidency. Or you can choose to stay in the race and we're going to 25th you. That's the way this whole thing ended up breaking down. Let's go to Adam. Adam in Boston. Welcome to the show.
Good evening, Brian. Thank you for taking my call.
You bet.
All right, I'm going to wrap this up short and sweet. Reason Kamala, their plan with Kamala is admit to nothing, post nothing, say as little as possible to the press, in front of the press. And what do I mean by that is, this may not be an exact quote of what she said, but it's pretty darn close. When asked about what she plans to do with inflation, she said in an approximate word, well, inflation is a thing, and it causes things to go up in price. Now, what my plan is to make sure that this thing doesn't happen again, to make other things go up in price.
And by the way, school's just around the corner for a lot of people again, and everybody loves a yellow school bus, don't they? I mean, look, you know, your point is so well taken. The moment she gets off script, we've seen what has happened for years now. We saw how failed her presidential campaign was. I mean, look, this is the ultimate switcheroo here, right? She failed miserably in her own presidential campaign. She didn't have to run a primary, and now she just slips in. They take a look at the clock. They go, okay, we're under 90 days. All we've got to do is just keep her on script for 90 days, keep the focus on Trump. And this is the Democrat strategy. They think that if they keep the focus on Trump, they'll win, because they think the more that people see and hear of Trump, the more it becomes about him, and the more people just don't like him. And that becomes a double-edged sword. They're not going to be able to play this game forever. And Trump putting down the gauntlet with the 3 proposed debates today is going to make it harder for her to hide going forward. I'm Brian Mudd, in for the great one, Mark Levin.
This segment of the podcast is exclusively sponsored by Pure Talk. Pure Talk offers great coverage and can save your family money on your wireless bill every single month. Go to puretalk.com to find the plan that's right for you. Thank you again for listening, and thank you so much for this sponsorship, Pure Talk.
He's here. He's here. Now, broadcasting from the underground command post, deep in the bowels of a hidden bunker, somewhere under the brick and steel of a nondescript building, we've once again made contact with our leader, Mark Levin.
But we can get out there, reach out, make the case. And for one thing, don't ever shy away from our progressive values. One person's socialism is another person's neighborliness. Just do the damn work.
Things that make you go, Things that make you go, for sure. You know the big difference between Tim Stolen Valor Walz, and Kamala Harris? She starts talking and she's like, I have no idea what I'm saying right now. How do I get out? He knows exactly what he's saying. But man, are they ever aligned. The one thing they have is chemistry. Brian Mudd in for Mark Levin. Mark a little under the weather tonight. And we are expecting him to make a strong and quick recovery. And hopefully he'll be back with all of us tomorrow. Yeah, one of the only differences, really, between Walz and Harris, other than him, of course, being a white dude, as that was his commentary on the White Dudes for Harris Zoom call, because, it's JD, that's weird, right? Nothing weird about that or that guy, but he is super intentional and knows what he's doing. Kamala is very much like, okay, where am I getting my marching orders today? What is it that I'm supposed to be saying or doing today? Where is that sorority group again to get me out of a really tough situation? Let's talk about chemistry, because chemistry won the day to make Tim Walz Kamala Harris's running mate. Chemistry is defined as the science that deals with the properties, the composition, and the structure of substances. It deals with the transformations they undergo, the energy that is released or absorbed during those processes. And when it comes to us human types, it's how that energy is released and absorbed when we're in proximity to one another that comes together. Now, in the case of proximity, not so much the physical proximity in the case of Kamala Harris and Tim Walz. I just don't even want to think about this. But the political chemistry. Very much political chemistry. You see, when there was the surprise by many that Tim Walz was the choice. He was a finalist for sure, but, you had most people on Shapiro, and if not Shapiro, Kelly, and we know that the anti-Semites in the Democrat Party won out, and so she went with the uber socialist Walz. But there was something else. She said it was personal and that there was chemistry. Well, one of the things that came to mind straight away, and I'm going to break down voting record stuff here for you a little bit in a moment again between the two of them. But one of the things that did come to mind, just in terms of how the two must have been together in the same room, how much of her thought process here also had to do with what it's been like for her to be second mate. If you think it gets awkward when Kamala and Joe go off script, either one of them, when they go off, can you imagine what it's like if you put the two of them in one room with some advisors and there's no script? Can you imagine what those occasions must truly be like? Imagine just how awkward and whatever that situation really is. Yeah, so how do you think the chemistry is in the room between those two? So, in Harris's desire to pick a white man as a running mate between Shapiro, Kelly, and Walz, maybe there was even the physical thing. Like, she was the most awkward in that room. But when you take a look at the relevance of a VP, and I know everybody and their brother, just to speak to this for a moment, thinks that, hey, if it was Shapiro, she'd win Pennsylvania. One thing that I am really quick to point out is that people don't vote for the bottom of the ticket. They really don't. It's overstated. And one of the things that is really important in this context, and I'm not saying that it wouldn't have been different this time. Maybe it would have been. Maybe if it had been Shapiro, Pennsylvania would be a bit different today. It's possible. I'm not saying it isn't. There is some history, but you have to go back in history. But the one thing, everybody will talk about this in news media and just conversationally. Oh, man, you picked the VP because of, a state that you want to win and everything else. And, some people are disappointed in Trump with Vance because Ohio's already a red state and all this. If you think of the vice presidential choice in the grand scheme of winning elections matters, just tell me the time that you voted for the bottom of the ticket. No, really. I mean, was it, good old Dick Cheney? You really were with Al Gore in 2000? But man, once Bush added Dick Cheney to the ticket, that did it for you. I know that the reason why Obama ended up carrying the day is that, man, people really just wanted them some Joe Biden, right? People are really voting for it. They were actually going to be with McCain and then secondarily Romney. But man, that Joe Biden really did it for. I mean, the fact of the matter is, people don't vote for the bottom of the ticket. Who is going to... Man, I really could break for Trump. But if only we have the right white guy at the bottom of the Harris ticket, then that's where I'm... Who would do that? So again, that whole thing is actually largely overstated. And the last time there is any evidence, and I mean any, that a vice presidential running mate made any kind of an impact in an election was 1960 with Lyndon Johnson and Texas when he was the running mate for JFK. So you have to go back that far to even make a case. So just putting that piece out there. But digging down a bit further, one of the things that you get into here about Walz and Harris, their policy positions are so alike. Where they actually have the most chemistry is on policy. You had the desperate attempt straight away by many in your godless souls and slanderous news media to paint Walz as something of a moderate. And that is something that he most certainly is not. Now, in the first hour, I brought you Kamala Harris's voting record. And as part of that, I mentioned that out of 120 senators that cast votes during Trump's 4 years in office, only 6 of them were less likely to vote for Trump's position on the issues brought before the Senate. In other words, she was more to the left than 94% of her colleagues. And she only ever voted in line with Trump's position 16.4% of the time, which was 10% less than even the average Democrat in Congress. Okay, so the average Democrat in Congress, 26%. Okay, so insert Tim Walz. You know what we have with him? A congressional voting record under Donald Trump. Before he was governor of Minnesota, he was in Congress, and we can see how he voted as well. So how did his voting record compare? Well, Walz voted with Trump's position just 20% of the time, making him far to the left of the average Democrat, barely at all during that time to the right of Harris herself, whose voting record most resembled that of Bernie Sanders, making them perfect almost on policy. Just for perspective, during that same window of time, you know who was far to the right of even Walz in the House of Representatives? Remember our good old friend from Texas, Robert Francis O'Rourke? You know, the guy who likes to call himself Beto? The guy who, when he was running for president, actually said, no, I really do mean that I want to come to your house and take your guns. That guy? The guy who wants to come to your house and take your guns. That guy was 47% more likely to vote with Donald Trump's positions in the House than Walz was. And what has he done as governor of Minnesota? Oh, right. He signed off on laws to provide taxpayer transgender surgeries for minors, driver's licenses for illegal immigrants, and of course, aside from using taxpayer dollars to turn children into trannies, because that's really what a priority in society should be, is taxpayer-funded child trannies. But of course, right down to the tampons that were being placed in boys' bathrooms in Minnesota's public schools. That's who this guy is, right? The same guy who has a socialism as another person's neighborliness. You know, that's what Hitler thought, right? I'm just being neighborly here. My socialism is just my form of neighborliness. It always ends up working so well, doesn't it? So yeah, taxpayer-funded tranny surgeries for minors, driver's licenses for illegal immigrants, among other policies. So it is that type of chemistry on policy. And that's why they're so comfortable with each other. So, as I mentioned, that there's a 84% degree of difference in policy positions between Trump and Harris. The greatest divide in overall policy positions between the two major party candidates that I've ever studied. You take a look at all of this political divide, and then what do we have in Tim Walz? Somebody who actually has gotten the agenda passed. Somebody who actually is like Kamala, but has delivered on those policies in the state of Minnesota. A preview of what's to come across this country if she's given the opportunity. And it was just a week ago that you had the guy who coined the term weird for the godless souls and slanderous news media to use to describe J.D. Vance, that is talking about one person's socialism being another person's neighborliness. That is Kamala Harris's running mate. That's the philosophy and the policy behind it that's at stake in this election. And as we've seen, his integrity is very much whatever he projects it to be, right? Well, he's he was in war, and speaking of guns, I mean, he's got the whole Beto thing going on there too. We gotta ban the guns that he used in war that he never fought in, because he was actually in Italy for a retired post that he didn't actually attain. So much that is similar between these two. The difference is that Walz is intentional, and Walz has actually delivered on these policies. So yes, they have a heck of a lot more in common, and that was probably the reason that chemistry and personal decisions won the day. I'm Brian Mudd, in for the great one.
Mudd Levin.
I'm going to let you in on a little wireless trick that can cut your cell phone bill in half every single month. Other major carriers want you to believe you need unlimited data so they can overcharge you. Here's the fact. Most of you are buying way more data than you'll ever need and you'll ever use. Pure Talk, my cell phone company, only charges you for data you actually want. Listen to this. For $25 a month, you can get unlimited talk, text, and 5 gigs of data plus mobile hotspot. Do you know what you can do with 5 gigs of data? You can browse the internet for 135 hours, stream 1,000 songs, or watch 10 hours of video. Folks, stop overpaying for wireless. Get 5G coverage with Pure Talk. Go to puretalk.com/Levin. That's puretalk.com/Levin. Switching is painless. It's easy. There's no contract, no activation fee. You can even keep your phone and your number. Again, that's puretalk.com/Levin, puretalk.com/Levin, and you'll save an additional 50% off your first month on top of all the other savings when you sign up with Pure Talk.
Well, he continually claims that he's a retired sergeant major. He's not. He's a retired master sergeant. He continued, when the deployment first came up, we started having meetings as command sergeant majors and operations sergeant majors to collectively get our training facts together, because we were, that's part of what we do as sergeant majors, is being subject matter experts in our fields and also responsible for the training of the soldiers that carry out the orders of the officers appointed over us to go into battle. Right. That's a pretty high priority for us. And he kind of consistently, we were aware of his campaign bid in some order or fashion, being that it was his first one. And he consistently told us as fellow sergeant majors at the time that he was going to go on the deployment. You could, as I remember him saying, you can count on us. And at the same time, having backroom conversations with other people, other entities inside the Minnesota National Guard to ensure that he could retire. He subverted the chain of command. He went around the chain of command. The brigade sergeant major had no clue. These are all important facts. And And he did it to continually feather his own bed. That was the shameful part of it. And then, of course, he never entered into the Sergeant Major's Academy. He never did one scrap of work. It takes years. He signed a commitment letter saying that he was going to do that job. He didn't.
Yeah, so that is Paul Herr, the Command Sergeant Major, the Minnesota National Guard, on Fox and Friends this morning, talking about Tim Stolen Valor Walz, and explaining what actually happened there, really kind of breaking down what it was that Tim Walz lied about, and that the Harris-Walz campaign lied about. Brian Mudd in for Mark Levin, and this has had such an impact that the Harris campaign has changed the characterization of his service now. They have issued a correction of sorts on the website to more appropriately reflect his rank. So the bottom line is you have Walz, who signs a commitment to attain the rank that he claimed that he had attained, but he never followed through on it. And then he ended up resigning, and he ended up running for Congress instead. And he ended up taking credit, and he has all this time taking credit for something he actually made a commitment, put his name on paper and said, I'm going to follow through and I'm going to, complete this service. Never did it. So broke that commitment and then took credit for the rank anyway. And so, yeah, you got a lot of people that were serving around that same time that are absolutely fed up with him. And you've had the left try to circle the wagons. So, oh, no, it's not stolen valor. And, technically he had the rank. It's kind of like, John F. Kerry and, I voted for the Iraq funding before I voted against it, that kind of thing. Well, he had the rank before he ended up losing it when he retired. Well, no, he never actually attained the rank he committed to. And then when he retired, any kind of characterization with the rank that he claimed went away. And the question then is the character of somebody who lies about their service. And it wasn't just, if it were just that one thing, that would be bad enough, right? But what has he said recently? He went out and said that we need to ban the guns that he used in war. Ban the guns that he used in war. He never saw combat. But we're supposed to ban the guns that he used in war. So is this not a pattern to where for 20 years, essentially now, he's stolen valor, he's lied about his rank, and then he lies about what he actually does and what he did in service, implying that he was in war when he was in Italy. And it's an affront to everybody who was serving on the front lines in that war. And it's also, again, the most absurd thing running, because semi-automatics, there are a lot of things that are used in war. Semi-automatics are not among them. I mean, it's a very popular line that is used. It is not exactly something that we do as a military practice. Only works for the unintelligent, the uninformed, and the people that are very easily afraid and scared on the left. But much worse when you actually lie about what you did, who you are, what your rank is. And if he's willing to lie about those things, what else is he willing to lie about? And if he is all about being neighborly with socialism, what do you think that means for you and your family, for the cost of living? What do you think that means for the safety of this country, the rest of the world? A lot to consider there. Brian Mudd in for the great one, Mark Levin.
I'm going to let you in on a little wireless trick that can cut your cell phone bill in half every single month. Other major carriers want you to believe you need unlimited data so they can overcharge you. Here's the fact. Most of you are buying way more data than you'll ever need and you'll ever use. Pure Talk, my cell phone company, only charges you for data you actually want. Listen to this. For $25 a month, you can get unlimited talk, text, and 5 gigs of data plus mobile hotspot. Do you know what you can do with 5 gigs of data? You can browse the internet for 135 hours, stream 1,000 songs, or watch 10 hours of video. Folks, stop overpaying for wireless. Get 5G coverage with Pure Talk. Go to puretalk.com/Levin. That's puretalk.com/Levin. Switching is painless. It's easy. There's no contract, no activation fee. You can even keep your phone and your number. Again, that's puretalk.com/Levin, puretalk.com/Levin, and you'll save an additional 50% off your first month on top of all the other savings when you sign up with Pure Talk.
Mark Levin, radio's principal patriot. Call in now at 877-381-3811.
This notion about the claim about being in actual combat, that's different. Walz did make a comment speaking to a group, he's done it a couple of times, where he has used language that has suggested that he carried weapons in a fighting situation. As you know, with your contact with the military, I know from coming from a military family, there is a difference between being in a combat area, being involved at a time of war, and actually being in a position where people are shooting at you. There is no evidence that at any time Governor Walz was in a position of being shot at, and some of his language could easily be seen to suggest that he was. So that is absolutely false when he said that about gun rights out there.
Yeah, so kudos to CNN correspondent Tom Foreman, who made that observation accurately on CNN yesterday. Brian Mudd in for Mark Levin. By the way, my wife, she ended up having a good one, too, since Walz ended up saying that we needed to ban the weapons of war, the weapons of war, the weapons that he used in war. She observed that I guess we don't need to ban any guns since he never used any in war. So, yeah, it's a pretty good point, pretty good observation as we are talking about Tampon, good old Tim Stolen Valor Walz, the running mate of one Kamala Harris, and already the observations that have been made here by us, by folks like Tom Foreman, that have resulted in the tweaking of the Harris-Walz website to somewhat more accurately reflect his military service. They have not drawn attention to it, but it, in fact, has been tweaked to reflect a depiction that perhaps is a little bit less dishonest than the one previously when he inflated his rank and was suggesting that he was in war when he wasn't. All right, so couple things as we are going to take a look at next steps here. I'm going to walk you through some of the election catalysts. We've had one of the more substantive ones that was going to happen just in this week with Walz that was named the running mate. Always overstated. One of the things I was pointing out earlier this hour, the running mate is always overstated. However, there is the potential for an already weak candidate at the top to potentially to be made weaker by the candidate at the bottom. While there's not evidence of a running mate being able to help the top of the ticket, at least since 1960, when you already are having your own challenges, I do think that there is an awful lot that could come into play in this particular scenario. And, there's potentially a lot of downside there as well. Now, I am Brian Mudd, and I am the host of The Brian Mudd Show. You can catch me, my home station, WJNO in West Palm Beach, The Brian Mudd Show, wherever you get your podcast, at Brian Mudd Radio socially. Would love to hear from you. And also, as we are going to get into some of the catalysts that are left in this election cycle, there are really three that I believe are left in play, including the wild cards that are left as we are now under 90 days away from Election Day. I also want to talk about the future of the Republican Party and where we are in this process, because there's been a momentum shift, no doubt, and a narrative change, no doubt, since Harris ascended to the top of the ticket. She's gotten the glowing press and everything from the godless souls and slanderous news media. But already that momentum has started to abate. And Trump, his presser today, I think it was smart in so many different ways, throwing down the gauntlet, putting out 3 potential debates, and now it's up to her to try not to hide from them. The timing of all 3 debates being in September, since you have the first votes in this election cycle that actually start September 16th in Pennsylvania. And we'll see what the response is. It ought to be interesting. Let's go to Lynn in Nevada. Lynn, welcome to the show.
Thank you for taking my call, Brian. Sorry to miss Mark Levin. Hope he gets to feeling better soon.
No doubt.
I have a bit of a scholarly question in regards to the 15th Amendment and Section 1 and Section 2. It seems to me that this amendment could be used by Congress in the event that there is another subversion to the vote this next election. Now, Trump, I heard him today in his speech, and he talked about them taking the presidency away from Biden. We on the Republican side still feel that the election in 2020 was subverted. So I think that's enough right there to question if this happens again a third time, and it would be enough to subjugate a bill appropriated to the Supreme Court to have the matter looked into thoroughly and have it resolved. And this country doesn't have to be erupted and disrupted again and again and again. It just seems to me that our founding fathers left us plenty of tools to work with if we would use our heads and do it.
Lynn, what I would tell you in this particular moment of time, and it pertains to the 2020 stuff as well, and I don't want to go back and rehash a lot of what ended up happening and a lot of what may have not happened that a lot of people think did happen during the 2020 election. One of the single biggest issues, just to kind of walk you back real quick, and is as far looking backwards as I'm going to go, the single biggest issues of misfeasance that you can really point to were Supreme Courts, state Supreme Courts, like, for example, in Pennsylvania, that allowed the law in the state to be circumvented. So you had, in the name of COVID, all the voting procedures that were thrown out the window. And was the process illegal? Well, according to the law, according to what was on the books, yeah. But when the state Supreme Court allowed that to happen, it wasn't illegal the way it was once before. When you had the United States Supreme Court that decided not to hear that case and cases from other states in similar situations, that became legalized, even if it wasn't appropriate. Now, that doesn't address the controllables, things like needing to have poll watchers. The Republican Party was caught flat-footed. And it was an inexcusable thing that had been caught flat-footed in places like Fulton County or in Philadelphia and in Detroit, and you name it, places where there are all kinds of things that a lot of people have suspicions about. But what it is isn't constructive. The me to you on this at this point, and we can all tangle ourselves in knots thinking about what could or couldn't happen and what the constitutional angles at this particular moment could be. My thought for you is, what are we doing ourselves that we can control that is constructive? And I actually mentioned this, last week when I was guest hosting for Mark, I ended the show by talking about this. If you go, for example, to the Republican Party website, what are they looking for help on right now? They are looking for volunteers right now. One of the big things, poll watchers. Republican Party still doesn't have enough poll watchers across this country. So rather than worrying about matters like this and concerns about, the election not happening or being stolen, how about we do what we can to make sure that in our area, it isn't, that we have adequate eyes in place and that we do have people that are minding the store. I do think the Republican Party has better leadership now and it's less likely to be caught flat-footed, but they need people on the ground to help. They also need volunteers to work the phones. They need volunteers to help get out the vote, among other things. And so that is what I would tell you to do, is rather than stressing and worrying about, all these things that are not apparent at this moment, but also aren't within your individual control, spend your time doing something constructive to try to win this election. And I believe if we do that, then Donald Trump will end up winning this election and be the next president of the United States. One thing that you can still take a look at, for all the shenanigans and everything else, he was still elected president of the United States in 2016. And we know that there was a lot in terms of the deep state and shenanigans and everything else that was going on back then, right? I mean, including the whole Trump-Russia collusion narrative that was playing out, and the man still won. We just need to do our part. Let's go to Dave in Ohio. Dave, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I just hope that Tim Walz can do for Kamala Harris what Geraldine Ferraro did for Walter Mondale.
One thing that was funny about that particular election, I was looking back at all the comparisons because, just want to make sure, as I say, look, nobody votes for the bottom of the ticket because nobody actually does. I still, to this day, have never had anybody that's reached out to me and said, this was the election where I voted for the bottom of the ticket. So for as much time oxygen as it occupies, if you only pick this person, this running mate, then you're going to win these states and all this. When I was going back and doing the research and confirming that, you do have to go back to 1960 before you can make a case, because you did have Dwight Eisenhower who ended up carrying Texas, and you did have JFK that ended up flipping Texas, which was instrumental in his win in the election over Nixon in 60, Lyndon Johnson in Texas. And I mean, speaking of shenanigans, the legendary stories about, what LBJ might have been up to in Texas. But nevertheless, it was heartbreaking again, because you talk about the 84 election, the one thing for Reagan, just the unbelievable win where he took 49 states. But of course, and this is actually the great irony for the people that are all that much more disappointed on the left, that thought, man, you're going to win Pennsylvania if you only have Shapiro, if you only have Pennsylvania's governor as your running mate, which again, I do think is overstated. But nevertheless, for the people on the left who believed that type of thing, or Arizona, if she had gone with Kelly, the irony is, of course, she went with somebody from a state that has been the most reliable Democrat state in election politics. You have to go back 52 years, the last time that Minnesota broke for a Republican, when it was Nixon in 72. But yeah, that 84 election, Mondale's home state, Minnesota, Reagan was within 0.2% of carrying Minnesota, and he would have carried all 50 states. That was the one thing that just got me. I mean, how amazing would it have been to have carried all 50 states? And he was 0.2% away. Let's go to Brent in L.A. Brent, welcome to the show.
Hello, Brian. Great talking with you. I just had an important national economic insight into Tampon Tim's taxpayer-funded free tampons for all of Camilla's woke white dudes. When a young white trans man for Camilla can't even afford to buy his own tampons, you know that the Biden-Obama-Harris Build Back Better green bankruptcy plan is a diversely devastating dumpster fire.
That was well played, sir. I mean, that's good stuff. Good material. Well done. Well executed. I approve of that message. Yeah, I mean, I guess the inflation really has been that hard that even, the white tranny dudes for Trump can't afford their tampons anymore. Going to have them taxpayer funded. I'm Brian Mudd, in for the great one.
Mark Levin.
I'm going to let you in on a little wireless trick that can cut your cell phone bill in half every single month. Other major carriers want you to believe you need unlimited data so they can overcharge you. Here's the fact. Most of you are buying way more data than you'll ever need and you'll ever use. Pure Talk, my cell phone company, only charges you for data you actually want. Listen to this. For $25 a month, you can get unlimited talk, text, and 5 gigs of data plus mobile hotspot. Do you know what you can do with 5 gigs of data? You can browse the internet for 135 hours, stream 1,000 songs, or watch 10 hours of video. Folks, stop overpaying for wireless. Get 5G coverage with Pure Talk. Go to puretalk.com/Levin. That's puretalk.com/Levin. Switching is painless. It's easy. There's no contract, no activation fee. You can even keep your phone and your number. Again, that's puretalk.com/Levin, puretalk.com/Levin, and you'll save an additional 50% off your first month on top of all the other savings when you sign up with Pure Talk.
And he intends to end the Affordable Care Act. You know what? If you want Donald Trump to win, then say that. Otherwise, I'm speaking.
Yeah, so the factions, the pro-Palestine heckler in her crowd at a rally, the factions that she has caved to as she went with tampon, as she went with Walz, many believe that she caved to the anti-Semitic wing, the anti-Israel wing of her party. Bottom line is, we have as much on the line as we've ever had in this election cycle. The good news is the future of the Republican Party in the country has arrived. At least I believe. You know, one of the things that I thought was most encouraging that came up during the Republican convention, some of the themes that I've actually been talking about for a few years now. You know, I've been thinking about a lot of the comparisons, and I've talked about some of them when I've guest hosted for Mark on this show in the past few years. But you go back to, it was October 22nd of 2021 that I first found data that pointed me in the direction of thinking, hold on, you know what we might have here? We might have a younger generation of Americans that are going to be similarly positioned to my generation, Generation X. You know, Generation X is the most conservative, the most Republican, quote unquote, of the generations, according to the author of the book Generations, which studied the generational differences in the beliefs of Americans. And why? No coincidence. Grew up in the era of Reagan. Saw the crappy policies of Jimmy Carter, Captain Peanut, as I like to call him, peanut farmer from Georgia. Perfectly good peanut farmer. But sometimes you feel like a nut. Sometimes you govern like one. He governed like a nut. But after Carter, we got Reagan, created a whole generation of conservatives. Well, here we are having had Trump. And I fully believe that Trump would, had COVID not happen, not only remain president of the United States, but completed the generational change. But I think getting back, he's going to be able to do it again. So here we are, so many comparisons between the Biden administration, the Biden-Harris administration, and the Carter administration. But one of the big opportunities here is coming up on the other side. And it was Vivek Ramaswamy who actually said that Gen Z will save this country and millennials will make it great again. Gen Z will save this country and millennials will make it great again. It was actually my favorite line from the Republican National Convention. I actually believe there's a lot of truth to it, and we are consistently seeing that in some of the polling data as well, with some of the younger voters that have made the turn towards Trump. Talk about that in the Catalyst coming up. Brian Mudd in for Mark Levin.
He's here. Now, broadcasting from the underground command post, deep in the bowels of a hidden bunker, somewhere under the brick and steel of a nondescript building, we've once again made contact with our leader, Mark Levin.
Are you confident that there will be a peaceful transfer of power in January 2025?
If Trump wins, no, I'm not confident at all. I mean, if Trump loses, I'm not confident at all. He means what he says. We don't take him seriously. He means it. All the stuff about if we lose, there'll be a bloodbath.
Who am I? Where am I? What am I doing here? At least he caught himself. I think for a moment, Biden thought he was back in 2020. That is going to air Sunday morning on CBS News, as Joe was indicating that if Trump wins, there would not be a peaceful transition of power. Oh, wait, I meant the other way. I don't actually know what I meant. Anyway. So, yeah, I mean, that guy, he still gives you a great deal of confidence that he's the president. Brian Mudd in for Mark Levin. Mark is a little under the weather today. We are anticipating a strong bounce back tomorrow, and hopefully he'll be back right here with us. Now, I briefly touched on the future of the Republican Party and this country having arrived. I want to share a little bit of optimism that I have that's out there. There are two times that broadly people have thought that I was nuts that otherwise typically agree with me. Now, I've been doing this I'm in my 27th year now. The 2 times that really stick out that people just thought I was cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. The ones that are like just recalled recently. So the couple instances go back about 20 or so years ago when I would talk about one day my belief that South Florida would save this country from itself. And what I meant by that is, like, literally the Hispanic population in South Florida, when Florida was the ultimate swing state once upon a time, would end up realizing what the political party is that represents their interest. And once they would latch on to that and those values and that understanding and stop being duped, that it would transform the state of Florida. But also that the philosophy within the Hispanic community broadly, which means about 30 different things in South Florida and in many parts of the country, that it would end up transforming other parts of the country. And we have seen that happen. And it's one of the main reasons, by the way, why Nevada is looking like it very well after having broken for Democrats for a long time now is very well positioned for Trump to flip in this particular cycle. But it's happened. We've seen that happen in South Florida to where Hispanics, not just Cubans, because there's always, the Cubans, but it's not just the Cubans anymore. It's Hispanics generally. And that has been a big part of the transformational story of the state of Florida. I mean, yes, relocations because of people that are fleeing blue states, that's all a part of it. But every bit as big as that has been the transformation demographically. The people that are here in South Florida in particular know what socialism is. They know what the policies look like, and they know they've been pitched by the left, and they have found the Republican Party as their home, and it has transformed the state of Florida. That philosophy is beginning to transform other states. But the other time that people thought I was nuts philosophically started to come about 3 years ago. It was in October of 2021, I first found data that I thought that millennials, potentially Gen Z, but then in particular millennials, would actually end up being the most conservative generation. And part of it is that, all generations historically have started out more liberal than they end up. The whole thing about, people live life and as they do, and they actually go, hold on, I have to pay what in taxes? I am supposed to be earning this, and this is all I get to take home. And, they have family formation and everything else. They actually get a life and realize what life is about and how much it costs and these types of things. They tend to become more conservative. But in particular, we saw a real pendulum shift during the onset of the inflation crisis, and it was with millennials. So I'll walk you into a little bit of this because Vivek Ramaswamy ended up nailing it, I thought, at the RNC. And you have between him and J.D. Vance, 2 millennials that represent the future of the Republican Party in many ways, I believe. And isn't it interesting that once upon a time, you had Ramaswamy who was involved with Democrats, and you had J.D. Vance who was a never-Trumper, and you take a look at their evolution personally, even recently. That is representative of something greater in this country. So, yeah, Gen Z will save this country. Millennials will make it great again. As I mentioned, it was my favorite line from the Republican National Convention. But when it comes to making America great again, Trump alone, even if he wins this election, he can't will it into existence, right? And a generation alone can't see to it that it happens. As Reagan famously said, freedom is a fragile thing, never more than a generation away from extinction. And that's why it's imperative that younger generations get it. It's why it's important that they embrace it. It's why it's important that they fight for it. And I don't think it was lost on Trump as he named a millennial. Somebody literally half his age as his running mate when he did it. Someone who is not just 1, but 2 generations younger than him. And I think it's key symbolically to making America great again. And as I've mentioned, Gen X, by and large, already gets it. In fact, polling has consistently shown that Gen X has become the most consistently conservative generation. This was documented in the book Generations, again, that studied the generational differences in the beliefs of Americans. The author of that book stated that Gen X is the most, quote unquote, Republican of the generations. And it's no random occurrence. It is the result of Xers having grown up with the original MAGA movement, which was Reagan's. And going back to October 22nd of 2021, I spoke to a generational opportunity that existed. The opportunity with the inflation crisis and eyes that were being opened in a way that they had not been opened before, that there were a whole generation of future conservative voters being born out of the lies and the failures of the Biden-Harris administration. Because just as Jimmy Carter's failures brought us Ronald Reagan, Joe Biden's failures are set to bring us the second coming of Trump. But also importantly, and just as importantly, not just winning an election. You know, one of the big issues that we've had right along is what? As conservatives, or even milquetoast Republicans with, some of the presidents that we've had over the course of time, even if you win an election, you never win the war, right? I mean, the war is always ongoing, but it always seems like we keep moving which direction? Further and further left. You really need generations to pull the thing back. So you have American values, the Constitution that is front and center. That you have faith and you have God, morality that is back into the family unit. These types of things are essential if we're not going to just, hey, Trump wins and we stall the inevitable march to the abyss for another 4 years. And that's what is in front of us right now. And I truly believe that Trump will have the opportunity to follow through on this, but also to finish what he started in converting these generations by illustrating the good policy to them. So when you take a look at what Ramaswamy said, he said, what does it mean to be a Republican in 2024? It means we believe in merit, that you get ahead in this country, not based on the color of your skin, but based on the content of your character. What a concept, right? I mean, it's one of the great things about MLK. You have the left that loves to talk about MLK, but they never like to actually follow what he said, right? That his dream was that one day people would be judged on the content of their character, not the color of their skin. So here you have Ramaswamy saying the same thing and your contributions. So we believe in merit, that you get ahead in this country, not based on the color of your skin, but based on the content of your character and your contributions. It means we believe in the rule of law. That means your first act of entering this country cannot break the law. It means the people who we elect to run the government ought to be the ones who actually run the government. And he said Donald Trump is the one who will actually unite this country, not through empty words, but through action, because success is unifying and excellence is unifying. And that, to me, was another amazing line from the speech. Success is unifying and excellence is unifying. Isn't that the truth? We unify when we're successful. Excellence is unifying. If you take a look at sports teams, right? It's always been the thing about sports when you don't bring politics into it. All the different backgrounds, ethnicities, generations, whatever, all the different backgrounds come together. If your sports team is successful, everybody has that common goal, that common excitement together. It's a unifying thing, that kind of success. Ramaswamy continued by saying, our message to millennials, yes, it's true. Our government sold us the false bill of goods with the Iraq War and the 2008 financial crisis, loading up our national debt that falls on our generation's shoulders, talking about millennials, telling us that if we took out college loans, we'd somehow get a head start on the American dream when it hasn't worked out that way. But we can't just be cynical about our country because the United States of America is still the last best hope that we have, and we deserve a better class of politicians. So, yeah, I mean, who doesn't think that we deserve a better class of politicians, right? And he said, my message to Gen Z is this. You're going to be the generation that actually saves this country. You want to be a rebel? You want to be a hippie? You want to stick it to the man? Show up on your college campus and try calling yourself a conservative. Say you want to get married, have kids, teach them to believe in God and pledge allegiance to their country. Because you know what? Fear has been infectious in this country, but courage can be courageous too. And he's right. He's right about all of it. No two generations are more disapproving of the Biden-Harris administration than Gen Z and millennials. Gen Z's support of the Biden-Harris administration is 27%. Millennials support the Biden-Harris administration at 35%. And it's very simple. That's because no two generations have been more screwed by the failures of these two than those two generations. And that is the crux of the generational opportunity that I started speaking about 3 years ago. It's the generational opportunity that is very much in play for Republicans today. And it's what I believe is ultimately going to save the day and save this country. I'm Brian Mudd, in for the great one.
Mudd Levin.
Vice President Harris has not just done interview after interview over the years. She's been doing the job of vice president for more than 3.5 years. Tremendous chapter in her career after having been a district attorney in San Francisco, after having been attorney general for the state of California, after having served in the United States Senate longer than J.D. Vance has even been in office. All right, so let's be clear as to where the experience and the maturity lies. And she'll continue to do more interviews. You've got to cut her a little bit of slack for the last 3.5 weeks, an unprecedented way to become the nominee for the Democratic Party.
Yeah, got to cut her some slack for not doing any interviews. It is unprecedented. And, so unprecedented that we don't think she should take any interview. I mean, that is the Senator Alex Padilla from California, by the way, who ended up succeeding the aforementioned Vice President of the United States. And I really like his message there. I really do think we should focus on her record. Don't you? She really does have quite the remarkable record. He is pointing to her remarkable record. Trump was at his presser today as well. His time as a prosecutor, how successful she has been and everything she's done, from destroying San Francisco, to helping get the Black Lives Matter writers out of prison. She was really successful at doing that. She's been really successful at allowing a record number of illegal immigrants to come across the southern border, including, as we learned this week, 99 illegal immigrants over the prior 2 years who had been on the terror watch list. Let's not forget the 99 terror watch list members allowed in by the border czar, Kamala Harris. Man, she's got a successful track record. So I actually agree with him that we should spend some time focusing on her record, don't you think? And as I pointed out, by breaking down her voting record in the United States Senate, boy, it most commonly resembled Bernie Sanders. How many people think Bernie Sanders is a good idea as president of the United States? Well, if you get Kamala Harris, you get somebody who only voted 0.3% of the time differently than the Bern. So are you feeling that? And are you feeling the company that she keeps as she opted for whom to be her running mate? Her chemistry pick, the very personal choice, the one she identified the most with. And she made it clear that it was that very personal choice, that chemistry. Oh, that's right. It's the guy who did the white dudes for Harris call and talked about socialism being a neighborly kind of thing, right? It's a very clear picture. So I do think we can focus on these things and see that you have the most radical presidential ticket in the history of the United States of America, which is really saying something given what we have put into office previously in this country. None the least of which would be, I don't know, folks like Woodrow Wilson and FDR. You take a look at Harris, and you're talking about somebody that, by way of record up to this point, is more radical than even those people. And again, the key with Walz, as I said at the onset of the show, it was all about getting the job done. The one thing that he's done is implement the agenda. You know, she's been very effective at not prosecuting and at getting those who might be in the crosshairs of prosecution that ended up rioting and destroying businesses and, you know, people's lives out of prison. She's very good at that. She's very good at letting terrorists into the United States of America. Very skilled at all these various different things. But in terms of actually taking a socialist-styled agenda and implementing it within a state, that is something that is, a Walz, accomplishment there. Something that he could add to her as she tries to avoid interviews at the top of her ticket. Now, talked about the opportunities that are in front of us in this election cycle and the failures of those policies. You might have seen in the trends, if you have gotten into poll watching, and many of us do, as we are this close, under 90 days before a presidential election, you notice a bit of a trend. And one of the big trends had been that the polls had shifted pretty considerably in the direction of Harris, even though at the peak, Trump was still running about 7 points ahead of where he was 4 years ago. You might have noticed a much better day that came in today with 3 polls that ended up showing a lot better news for Trump. So maybe that little Harris relief rally bump is over, and some of the underlying details, like younger voters, starting to come back around to Trump as they're noticing what her policy positions really are. I'm Brian Mudd, in for the great one, Mark Levin.
America's most powerful conservative voice, The Mark Levin Show. Dial in now, 877-381-3811.
And then can you just respond to President Biden basically saying that he doesn't think, or he fears, that there wouldn't be a peaceful transfer of power if you lose this election?
Well, he actually said it 2 ways. First, he said it incorrectly, then he corrected himself. Do you agree with that, right? You know, if you watch him. He said it 2 ways.
I don't have a comment, but I'm asking you for your comment.
He said it 2 ways because he doesn't really know what he said. Why didn't he bring it up at the debate? You know, he had a chance for 90 minutes to bring it up at the debate. He could have talked about that at the debate, and he didn't do it. Everyone said, oh, he said this and he said that. He's just, they give him something to read off. He read it very badly because he actually said it the opposite. Then he had to go back and correct himself. He said the opposite. He should have brought this up at the debate. If he had a problem, of course there'll be a peaceful transfer. And there was last time, and there'll be a peaceful transfer. I just hope we're going to have honest elections. That's all. Okay?
And boom goes the dynamite. No, I mean, that is Trump in all of his glory right there, right? I mean, he takes down a reporter that is trying to cover for Biden having a who am I, where am I, what year is it kind of moment when he's talking about Trump winning, and there won't be a peaceful transfer of power. This, again, going to air Sunday morning in a CBS interview, then catching himself. So Trump corrects the reporter who was trying to slide right past that little factoid, and then has the dynamite answer right behind it. I mean, absolutely phenomenal. And as he laid down the gauntlet today, 3 different debates that he is proposing with Kamala Harris, all in September, and 2 of those with venues that one would think would be friendly to Harris, an NBC and ABC, the first with Fox News. Going to be very interesting to see what she has to say. And be mindful, of course, Trump already did the one debate. Who did he do it with? He did it with CNN. If Joe Biden and Donald Trump can have a CNN debate, why can she not have a Fox News debate? Very interesting to see what's going to happen here. And again, the timing super smart too, all in September, given that what is really these days an election season that starts in September, where you have 5 states that actually are going to start voting in September. The earliest, Pennsylvania, super important, September 16th. Just 4 days later, you have another 4 states, one of which happens to be Virginia. So yes, the timing and everything was brilliant and classic Trump. Now, as we take a look at some of the catalysts, Brian Mudd in for Mark Levin. And by the way, I am the host of The Brian Mudd Show. My home station is WJNO in West Palm Beach. You can catch The Brian Mudd Show podcast wherever you get your podcasts, at Brian Mudd Radio socially as well. It is always an honor and a pleasure to be here with you. I see three catalysts, even including the surprises on the horizon, now that we have Walz out of the way. And one of the things that's interesting, I mentioned it just before the bottom of the hour, you have seen in today's poll, ever since Harris got in the race, things had been trending her way in the polls. All of a sudden today, you had three come in. One shows a tie, another Trump up 2, another Trump up 5. So maybe that bounce, that relief rally. You know, I liken it to the stock market. And we've even seen some of this week after the 3-day huge sell-off late last week into this week, where you might have so much selling so quickly with so many people having dumped a bunch of stocks that the buyers that are just stepping in will push prices up, sometimes temporarily, just in the absence of selling. The question always is, okay, was that really a bottom that was put in this case, like a stock market correction, or is it just a relief rally that is going to be met with more selling once investors kind of regroup? Same kind of deal here. With Harris, was she really just kind of like the relief rally of sorts for Democrats to where, oh, it's not Joe, and so it's anybody behind door number 2? But then as they start to digest a little bit more and they take a look at what she represents in her policies, one of the things I note about the polls that came out today, we had seen that Trump was doing extremely well with the youth vote. So I mentioned at the onset of this hour, you know, Ramaswamy kind of setting things up, talking about millennials and Gen Z will end up saving this country. We had seen a very big move towards the right by younger generations, with millennials outright breaking for Trump while Biden was still in the race. Well, guess what? We have polls out today that show Trump leading with millennials again. And so as people are kind of taking a look at this, and oh no, Harris really is a socialist, and that Walz, I mean, that's what he represents. They're figuring stuff out. Give them credit for becoming informed. And in her whole basement campaign 2.0, where she's trying to avoid the media, pretend that she doesn't really stand for anything. I'm whatever you want me to be. I'm androgynous here politically. Well, we've got a few more catalysts that are ahead of us. The next is the DNC. Well, I say the next. One of my other catalysts could end up being the next based upon the timing with Iran. But you have the DNC, and this thing has the potential to still be a double-edged sword. You know, you're going to get 4 days of glowing media coverage for the DNC. That typically leads to a slight post-convention bump. By the way, Democrats typically average getting about 2 points in the polls a week after the DNC concludes. So that is just kind of what you can take a look at historically. So with that game ready to come up here in a week and a half, you can take a look at that. But is it going to be still smooth sailing? I mean, there's a belief that a lot of the dissent over Israeli policy is gone now that Joe isn't there, and you had Kamala boycott Netanyahu, and you had her not choose Shapiro as her running mate. Well, are you still going to have some of that dissent? Will there still be protests in Chicago? Or will it just be the usual, oh, you know, it's Monday through Thursday in Chicago, and the streets are just, you know, shot up and whatever else goes on? I mean, it might be hard to tell the difference between the protesting and just the usual, but nevertheless, will that happen? Could you see some of this spill over onto the floor itself? And what does happen? What does happen if Iran does make a move in attacking Israel sometime between now and then? What happens based upon the U.S. response? What happens with Harris and what the position is that she takes on that? Will she really take a position in opposition to Israel? Will she really continue to try to avoid the press and not even answer the question? Not even maybe address it in the convention? That is something that has the potential to be a catalyst and a double-edged sword. The DNC is not a foregone conclusion, even for the typical bounce. Next catalyst. You got that lawfare campaign against Trump. that is an especially interesting one. Remember, in the midst of all these debates that Trump has proposed right now, you still have on the schedule September 18th. New York Judge Juan Merchan has scheduled Trump's sentencing date in the criminal case. I mean, what's going to happen there? Will there be another potential delay in sentencing in that case that would push it potentially past the election? Will Merchan choose to move ahead in his sentencing? If he does, what's he going to do? Would he really try to jail him? If he did, how quickly would that appeals process play out? Which, of course, Trump will win one way or another on appeal, given Merchan's blatantly biased handling of that case. But how long would all that take to play out? And then you have the two particular potential October surprises, which in reality may already be here. The first is that potential for an all-out war between Iran and Israel. If we really do see that kind of escalation, how will you feel about an escalation of that war? How's the average American going to feel? How is the average anti-Israel Democrat going to feel? There's so much potential downside for the entire world from this happening. The precipice potentially of World War III. I mean, something biblical if you go right down to it. But there is also political downside for Democrats. No doubt about it. From Harris on down. And you take a look and it'll put everything back in focus, how we got here. The weakness that led to the collapse of Afghanistan, to the Taliban, China. They're consolidating power over Hong Kong, threatening Taiwan and the Philippines, Russia's invasion of Ukraine, the Hamas-Israel war, and then this. And there's no doubt the contrast with Trump will become clear. Again, as people are paying more attention and people are becoming more informed about who she really is and what she represents as well. Again, remember, it's not like people liked her as vice president. You only had 38% of Americans approve of her performance as vice president. An approval rating, again, that was worse than Biden's when he dropped out at 40%. So for the people who are disapproving, not hard for them to go right back to that place. For everybody else who was like, oh, she's not Biden, that whole relief rally effect may not stick in there a whole lot longer. But then the other one, and we could also be on the precipice, the economy. What we have seen play out with the economic numbers over the past week plus has really been something else. Now, there's a belief most recently, like as of today, that, oh, maybe the recession really isn't on the table, even though JP Morgan today just increased recession risk to 35%. Last week was actually our worst week of economic information. If you take a look at everything that happened in total that we had since 2020, and before that, you would have to go back to February 2010 to find a series of numbers that were so poor, from manufacturing to employment-related data. So all of this stuff can play, and most of it not good for El Presidente and El Vice Presidente. Let's go to Hall of Famer Jimmy from Brooklyn. Jimmy, welcome to the show.
You know, they say that this new VP candidate from Harris is this guy Walz. They say Walz is middle of the roader. He's middle of the road on the communist highway. This guy is hardline communist. You know who else came from Minnesota? Gus Hall, leader of the American Communist Party. Those people are everywhere. You may not know it, but they're everywhere. Let me real quick. I've been studying the communist stuff for over 50 years. This is a booklet here about the communists working with the blacks. I want to read you just one sentence. So the communists work with the blacks. They're describing here how they work for civil rights, voting, equality, everything that sounds good. But then it says, that will open the way for the development of the struggle to its logical revolutionary conclusion, the replacement of the exploitative capitalist system with a new just society, socialism. Okay, so that's how they work among the blacks. Everything they're doing is to ultimately bring the blacks as a united group for socialism. In another communist publication, the contents I'm going to show you here. So you see the template, how they work among the black Americans. So the next thing I have from the Communist Party, this is the contents: labor and trade unions, the Negro question, the Puerto Ricans in the United States, the Mexican-American people in the Southwest, the youth, problems of family farmers, the agriculture workers. Each one of these is a different section of the book, and it's explaining the same way they work with blacks, they work with all these groups. It's the Popular Front, the United Front, the All People's Front, and it's all pulled together, and that's how they get that all into the major voting bloc that's permanent among the Democrat Party. It's absolutely brilliant. It's the world communist movement. The communist parties in Lebanon created Hezbollah and Hamas. The communist parties in the Palestinian Communist Party built the PLO. Lenin, I wrote it. I explained this in a long interview I did. Lenin's concept of a party of a new type, talking about the communist parties. They're in every single country all working together. And when they got into the Democrat Party in America now is basically a front for the Communist Party.
Great call. You absolutely nailed it, as always. There is one thing that's backfiring, though. It's not working according to plan with all of the Hispanics. And that's where I talk about the South Florida story and the exporting of legal immigrants who know socialism when they see it. And that's where their fissure in their plan is starting to break and backfire. Education is the key. You're right on point. Brian Mudd in for the great one.
Mark Levin.
What do you think? Does she need to go out there and start taking some questions? What do you think?
You know, her strategy the first 11 or 12 days has been pretty good, but I find this really interesting. You had Trump saying Joe Biden isn't getting out in the country because he's too old. Now you have Kamala Harris and Tim Walz in state after state, 2, 3, 4 a week holding rallies, and Donald Trump saying I'll do a press conference at Mar-a-Lago. The energy in this campaign has shifted dramatically, but I promise you, when Kamala Harris does a press conference, people will feel very comfortable. She'll actually answer the questions she's asked.
Yeah, that is Detroit's mayor. When she gets around to doing a press conference, people are going to feel very... Why doesn't she do a press conference? Why do we have to wait for this theoretical thing that is yet to happen? Why are we now 19 days into her having been the presumptive Democrat nominee for president, and now this week officially the nominee, and still she won't answer questions? The gauntlet's been thrown down 3 debates. Will she woman up and accept them? Lot to come. Stay tough, stay strong. Brian Mudd in for the great one, Mark Levin.